Peyton, I got a question for you. Do you like flying?
Yes.
You like it?
Yes, I enjoy flying, and I fly maybe once or twice a year.
Sure.
I think I like that it's hard to get on the internet. Obviously, you can get on the internet on a plane with the right, if you pay them.
Yeah, you got to pay, but you can, yeah.
Yeah, I like that there's not a lot of things you can do on a plane, and that allows me to just say, this is my video game time, and
Sure.
my Nintendo Switch the battery will last long enough that I
Sure.
can usually make it through a flight without charging, and I get to just say, here's some time that I couldn't be doing anything more productive.
Exactly.
I'm just going to do this thing.
Yeah. I'm a plane reader generally, maybe movies sometimes, but
Right.
But yeah, this leads me to my next question. Is it scary at all to you to fly? Are you scared of it at all?
No, and I don't know if it's because I didn't fly until I was maybe a teenager first. I don't know if it would have been better if I was younger or not, but I haven't had too many, I would even say traumatic flight
Sure.
experiences. I've had mild turbulence. I've never gotten a bruise from
Right.
like something hitting me. So I feel like I've solved it. Like a lot of things in life, I end up researching a lot, and I
Sure.
use that to get rid of any fear that I have on that, where I read about how safe it is to fly compared to driving a car.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is. It's way safer. And like I'm not generally scared to fly at all. I occasionally like if I'm sitting in a window seat like by the wing, it's kind of weird to look at. Like how it just kind of flops in the wind. You know what I mean? It's like odd.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
And if you think about just the generic idea of like, oh, I am in an incredibly heavy metal tube flying through, like it's weird, right? Yeah. I'm not scared of flying at all. But I can understand how you would be scared of flying, especially if you went through something like what happened on Friday, January 5th. And on the 5th of January, an Alaskan Airlines flight had a little bit of a problem, a little bit of a whoopsie, a little bit of a pickle they were in, right? And what happened was mid-flight at 16,000 feet, a door flew off. Okay, so like, I mean, imagine you're in this scenario, right?
Yeah.
That would be terrifying. That would quite possibly, even statistically understanding that doesn't happen very much, if at all, like very rarely, that might prevent me from flying for a very long time.
Yeah, that might make me become the next John Madden of I'm not going to fly, I'm going to take my tour bus everywhere.
Right, and the only problems really come when you're trying to go overseas. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
sure.
Like, that might stop me from flying. But like I'm talking minutes after this happened, there was a guy named Sean Bates who was out for a walk, minding his own business, just walking down his road, looking down, and he happens to see, nestled under a bush, he sees a cell phone. And he looks under that bush, he picks up the cell phone, and the cell phone has no lock screen, and it's open to a receipt from the baggage claim of this Alaskan Airlines flight. And so it turns out Sean Bates found a phone that fell out of a plane at 16,000 feet in the air, and it survived the fall.
Was this like a 2005 Nokia?
No, it was an iPhone, like a current, like I don't know if it was a 15 or a 14, like a very current
New enough,
iPhone.
yeah.
And like, what are the odds of that? Like, think about that. What are like the odds that a plane has a problem like that in the first place?
Mhm.
Very, very low. The odds that a phone falls out of it, that's probably higher because I'm sure the pressure and all that thing, that's crazy.
Sure.
But the odds that the phone doesn't break falling 16,000 feet is crazy. But you know what makes it even more crazy?
It was his phone? No.
It had no lock screen on it.
Wow.
Can you tell me, like, I legitimately, I'm probably not the one to talk to because I didn't even know you could set up a phone without a lock screen.
Yeah, you're really making me think about
I
like,
looked it up.
yeah.
It turns out more people than I would have imagined don't use a lock screen at all. It's like there are various surveys that have been taken with various groups of people, but it's anywhere from like 5 to 15% of people don't use a lock screen.
Really?
Which is crazy to me because it's literally so easy and it's built in and like it's default basically that you do. So you kind of have to turn it off.
Mhm.
But like, what are the odds that all of those things would align? Like so low. I couldn't believe it. It's actually crazy. I really truly didn't even know you could set up a phone without a lock screen. But today I learned two things. I learned that an iPhone can fall 16,000 feet and survive. And I learned that there are people who just don't lock their phone ever, which is wild.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. I'm Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys.
All right, Chris. So it is my turn now, and for my action, I'm going to be casting a Charm Person spell on you. On a scale of 1 to 30, how wise would you say you are?
1 to 30?
Yes, 1 being least wise thing you could imagine, 30 being the most wise being you can imagine. Where do you fall?
Man, that's one of the... I hate these things. You know what I mean? Because, like, I don't think I'm dumb, but I also am fully aware that I'm... 19.
19. Okay, so that will be a +4 modifier. And then I need you to roll this 20-sided die.
Okay. D20 they call these, right?
Yes. Okay.
This is a heavy boy.
Oh, yeah. This is I think it's actually metal. And what'd you get?
7.
You got a 7. Okay, so then plus your wisdom modifier, that is 4. Okay. So you failed that saving throw, which means that you are charmed, and you'll regard me as a friend for the next hour, and at the end of the hour, you will know that you were charmed and turn hostile. So we better get this episode going. I have limited time here. So I think you got the gist of what I was doing here.
Sure.
Like, what do you think I was doing?
I mean, we're role-playing gaming here.
Yeah. So we're like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, we're
like,
Dungeons and Dragonsing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I recently had the pleasure of playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time in many years.
Okay.
With my friend Ethan. He's been working on his DM skills, and he invited me over to play the other weekend just for like a quick little by quick, D&D's not quick,
No.
but like a one time and not like a
one-off.
Yes, a one-off. Yeah, one shot. I think they call them.
One shot.
And I imagine that some amount of our audience, and maybe you as well, have some ideas in your head of what Dungeons and Dragons might be and some misconceptions about it. So I want to try to briefly explain what you actually do when you play. Like we've talked about this before in the past off air. Like you played once and didn't like it?
I played once. I didn't not like it. I'm not into fantasy so much, and I know D&D is like a ton of fantasy type stuff. The one I played was a little more sci-fi focused, which I did enjoy. We probably did like 6 sessions maybe.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it for what it was. And I enjoyed learning the mechanics and all of that. It's really complex.
Yes. Yeah, that's you are 100% right. They are usually not that simple. So like for those of you who are uninitiated, so Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game. And the idea is that you and your friends pretend to be a group of adventurers in this somewhat fantasy world, and you fight monsters, and you usually end up saving the day. And there's a person who is referred to as the Dungeon Master, or DM, and they help tell the story. And they organize the battles, and they will pretend to play some of the roles of minor random characters that you meet along the way. All the other players, though, they have what's called a character sheet, which is a piece of paper that has all the important information that you need to know about your character. How strong they are, how knowledgeable they are about history, how good are they at understanding the intentions of an animal, like the basics in life. And these days, everyone uses these really good, like, form-fillable PDFs. I got to mess around with those, and they're great because you can click buttons and you can like hit arrows to raise and lower your HP. They're like they've gotten a lot better than kind of the pen and paper routes that I had been playing a long time ago, back when I was in college. So about half of a game of D&D is the DM describing what's happening around you and your party making decisions based on that. And no, you don't have to wear a wizard hat and dress up in a costume or speak in like a bad fantasy accent. Every time I played, no one is deathly serious about this stuff. And I would describe it kind of like doing some short form improv where you're just like, you're trying to make each other laugh, trying to mess with each other and put yourself into funny situations that you can laugh about later. And the other half of the game is grade school math with dice rolls. And you can't just say, I walk up to the shopkeeper and I steal all of his stuff. Because if you could just will that into existence, there wouldn't be any stakes. There's no real...
it's not really a game.
Right, exactly, yeah. So like the DM would then probably tell you to roll the 20-sided die, the D20, as they call it, and add the number to the roll of your sleight of hand skill. And then depending on the number that he has on his paper of what you have to hit, you'll roll the dice and he'll say, like, if you succeed or you fail. For those of you who don't do this kind of stuff a lot, this probably sounds incredibly complicated, even though I removed about 99% of the instructions. And it's even so much harder to be a DM than a player.
Yeah.
Like, you have to do all this research. You spend hours of prep time, and you might take like a path to the left at the fork in the road. And there are whole things that if you would have taken the path in the right, you would have done different things. The DM's trying to make it so that both directions will eventually lead you to a point. You have to drop hints to people so they know where to go. And if you think this is difficult, imagine a scenario where you are playing Dungeons and Dragons in a death row prison.
Oh, no.
Yes, there is a growing population of prison inmates who play Dungeons and Dragons.
Interesting. I mean, I see the appeal, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't take a whole lot of, stuff to do that.
Yes. Yeah, you are definitely right that it's not like you're playing a video game and you have to get the console and the game and the cartridge, all the controllers and stuff. That like there are fewer things to grab and they're more common, but there are some challenges to overcome. So first of all is the cliche. Prison is kind of like a dungeon, and it is full of monsters. The inmates are all aware of this, and they try to focus their campaigns more about like visiting villages and exploring the open world. They try to, from what I've read, they try to avoid the whole dungeon motif altogether, just because the goal is to escape reality, and they don't want to be reminded of the fact that they're incarcerated.
That they live in a dungeon.
Yeah. But when it comes to the equipment, like you mentioned, some state and federal prisons explicitly ban D&D from being played. But it doesn't really stop the inmates there because, I mean, they're motivated to play. So since there isn't like, it's not like a board game box where it just is plastered to Dungeons & Dragons and here's all my little pieces. It's hard to understand as an observer what is D&D and what isn't. So one of the reasons why that they would ban it in the first place has to do with like the books. So a lot of prisons will ban hardcover books and they only allow paperback books because a big hardcover book could be used as a weapon if you really tried hard enough. And that wipes out all of the official rule books. From everyone I've seen, they're always hardcover.
Yeah,
really
I've only seen
hundreds of pages. So that's a challenge. And what often happens is that the inmate who is the DM usually has to kind of remember these things or they were taught like the oral tradition from a previous prisoner of here are all the rules, or to an extent they have to kind of make it up as they go and try to like assign some rules based on the general feel of the game. So without the books in play, it's kind of a combination of pens, paper, some figurines, maybe like a board that they can make a map on, and their minds. Several inmates have claimed that when a CO, like a corrections officer, asked them what they were doing and saying like, D&D's banned, what are you guys playing? They would just say that they're playing Pathfinder, which is like the Pepsi of tabletop role-playing games. Where it's like, oh no, this isn't D&D, this is Pathfinder. And like the guards, I mean, if the guards aren't nerds, they don't know the difference. And they're like, well, what can I do? They're not playing D&D.
Right.
So like imagine if your prison doesn't explicitly like prohibit D&D, you now have to deal with dice being banned in almost every prison.
Right.
Because the connotation here is that if you have dice, then it makes it easy to gamble. And if there's gambling, then there's going to be arguments over gambling and unofficial currency being exchanged. And they want to try to crack down on the amount of fights, really.
Sure.
So like I can understand that. And you need a wide variety of dice to play D&D. So like you've got the D20 in your hand, and the 20-sided die is probably the most like iconic style of dice for Dungeons and Dragons. But whenever you buy like a set of dice, you need a D4, a 4-sided die. It's a little pyramid. A D6, the pretty traditional other kind of dice of the 6-sided that you normally play games with. Your D8, your D10, your D12, depending on your character class. And sometimes there are certain character classes that need a D100. Those are fun to run.
Wow.
Those are very fun to roll because they're basically like a ball, and you have to be careful. Like it takes forever to get them to stop right, and they keep rolling. But those are specialty though. But obviously, like these inmates, they have a will, and they are going to find the way. And I'd read a very long article about all the ways that inmates get around not having dice and find a way to play. In my opinion, toilet paper is actually the least surprising way.
Right.
Yeah, like I've spoken to people in the past who have spent time in jail, and they have talked about not making dice out of toilet paper, but just the versatility that comes with toilet paper in prison. There was I had a friend in high school whose dad, I think, spent a couple days in jail. And for some reason, when we were like on a fishing trip, he decided to tell me about this. And it was over Valentine's Day. And he was kind of a creative, artistic guy. And he was able to teach the inmates that you could take some Skittles, you take some red Skittles, take some green Skittles, and you get your toilet paper and put the Skittles in water. And that you're able to dilute, pull all the dye off of the water, like off the Skittles into the water. And then you soak and have your red and your green toilet paper, and it absorbs the color. And then when you let it dry, you fashion it origami-like into a rose. And then when your girl comes and visits you in prison,
You have a beautiful toilet paper rose.
exactly. I know that's exactly what they were hoping for when they came to this. But like what it does show is that like with enough time and effort and creativity, you can make toilet paper into anything. And if you have a windowsill, and you basically like mold the toilet paper to the shape of that right angle corner, and you let it dry from the sun and the light and the air over time, then you're able to like rotate it. You just keep like rotating it different amounts and different dimensions, and you're able to make this compact but very like rigid 6-sided die totally out of toilet paper. Now, I've been told the way you roll this stuff, you would not roll it in the same intensity that you would do with a normal die, where like you want to make sure these things don't break. So it's kind of more like a soft toss, I guess, but it does work for sure. And one of the problems though is that prisons frequently will raid bunk beds. They will do like raids on personal belongings because a lot of just like random crap gets saved over time that it's kind of just junk, and they want to the officers want to get rid of things, or they're just worried that someone's got contraband over time and they try to get rid of it. So you also need to be very good at like making something that is easily replicable. And some people have had friends on the outside send them little what are called dice templates, and it's just a sheet of paper that has like the printed shapes on how to, if it passes through like the mail security, then you can then cut this out and you can make your little like templates for dice, and that way you can just remake them all the time and like be able to play. I've also seen some even more creative ideas where some people they'll make like a spinner out of like a piece of cardboard, and they'll have, I don't know, I think someone like disassembled a battery. There's like a part of a battery. If you disassemble it and attach it to a piece of cardboard, you can make a spinner and you can just write the numbers.
Interesting.
So you're not even rolling the die, but you just need a way to generate a random number.
Yeah, random number.
Yeah. There's another way with like two like styrofoam cups, and you cut a hole in the cups, and then the inside cup has all the numbers, and then you spin the cups and like rotate them, and you're able to get the numbers. So like the point here is that they have definitely solved the dice rolling problem, and they are finding, life finds a way. So my mother-in-law works in a medium security prison. So of course I talked to her about this, and I'm trying to keep things as anonymous as I can, just so she doesn't run into any problems here. So my first thought was like, well, if you have someone that plays D&D, can I just talk to them? I learned that is not very easy to do. That you can't just call up prison inmates that you don't know and ask them about their RPG campaigns, which I guess makes sense. So I had her ask around the prison, and she was able to talk to some of her coworkers, and they do in fact play D&D at her prison. And the officers say that D&D is banned in all prisons in their state. And so that it's not, they shouldn't be playing it, but that the inmates just call it something else to get it around the rule, which leads, like, it's the whole Pathfinder thing that I'm talking about, where, so this seems to be a widespread technique that somehow just gets through.
Well, and I mean, really, what's interesting about, like, we've already talked about this, it does, other than the dice, it's mostly made up. Like, it's mostly imaginary, it's in your mind. Like, you don't need a board, you don't need, like, how are you going to stop people from like speaking to each other using their imagination? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Like it's like the perfect storm for this, because it almost can't be stopped.
Yeah, so it's better to often, they just ignore it, because hey, how are you really gonna try to get into the argument with the inmate about?
Right. Like it's interesting.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things that I found out about, like with her prison, is that one of the officers said that he had worked at a maximum security prison in the past, and that the inmates there took their craftsmanship very seriously, and they had like a board that they would play on that I think they would maybe draw on, like erase the maps, but like I guess that and like the figurines and everything that they played with, they were so well made that the officer at first thought that they were official. And then it had to like look at them closer to realize that these guys just made them look so good that they looked like they were manufactured.
Wow.
So the most hardcore prison D&D experience I could find, which was unsurprisingly in death row prisons. I don't know how much you know about death row. I learned a lot about death row. I feel like I knew more about death row records than I did the actual
I've
thing.
read The Green Mile. That's my knowledge on it.
Okay. Yeah, I have not done that. So executions are a lot more rare these days in the US, but there was kind of a time when they became a lot more popular. So these days, death row prisoners may wait 20 years until they are actually executed. And I know that there are sometimes situations where there will be like a weird logistical thing where I think people think of the idea of the electric chair or whatever, and I don't think that's something that's done anymore. And I think it's kind of like a drug cocktail that they kind of describe
Yeah.
it, where it's like there was some not realistic movie I watched that it tried to explain this, but I think there's like 3 different chemicals, and you eject this one and it does this thing, and then you do a second one,
Right.
and then a third one, and
Right. It's
whatever.
like basically to make it humane, like not painful, and then it just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. So I think the companies that sell these chemicals don't want to sell them to prisons. So there's a kind of a weird thing where even if they decide I want to do this, all the companies that have these controlled substances say, well, maybe just we don't want to do this and we're not going to sell them to you. So then there's just an awkward situation where the prison's like, well, we can't do it. We were told to do it, and I don't know how many years it's going to take to find the stuff. But since these guys are waiting for a long time, and the idea of a life sentence, well, not even a life sentence, but like being sentenced to death, is that there is no chance of reintegrating that person back into society. The idea is that like they are not going to. If you go to jail, you might have your prison sentence shortened if you're on good behavior. But for people that have sentenced to death, they don't really have that option. So no one really puts like time into rehabilitation programs because they consider these people to be like, it's a lost cause. It's a waste of time, regardless of if you think that's true or not. Like I think that's kind of what happens. And from my research into this, a lot of the people who commit crimes that are on death row, they committed crimes when they were 18 years old, and they will be in their 40s and they are still there. And the death penalty started becoming a lot more popular in the 90s into the early 2000s. But there was some scientific research that came out, which I've heard about this, and I never really connected it to the whole prison situation. It was maybe starting to swing public opinion in the opposite direction. We started to learn about brain development, specifically in the prefrontal cortex, where controlling your emotions and making good decisions happen. And I've had people say about how it takes you into your early to mid 20s until that part of your brain totally develops. And Texas death penalty law specifically was established in the 1970s, and the idea is that the death penalty should be given if the defendant poses any future danger to society. So, like with this research coming out, the attorneys started looking at all these people who were sentenced in their teens to the death penalty and saying that you couldn't prove that these people presented a future danger because their brains were still developing. If you gave them a few years, you can maybe prove that they aren't a future danger and that they shouldn't be here in the first place. So there was this like big rush of inmates who had this happen to them where they realized that like there is maybe some hope here. My sentence might actually get like adjusted or amended, and I might end up outside of prison at some point in my life. So I have to learn how to reintegrate myself into society because no one is doing classes for me. So D&D became a makeshift life skills class for these guys. Since a lot of them had been incarcerated since like right when they became adults, they don't know how to rent an apartment or collect a paycheck or do like financial management. So the DM would be, whether it was subconscious or if they knew what they were doing, were teaching them how to manage money through their characters earning and spending gold. And when they would get low on money and they would look for different like jobs, they would learn about risk management. I can go with the very safe and boring job that like I know will give me like a small amount of gold and do that a bunch of times, and maybe it's a little bit boring, but maybe it's consistent. Or I can go on this big raid that might make me rich, or my character might die from it. So then you have to make that decision of how do I want to earn a living? Do I want to be risky and inconsistent, or do I want to be very consistent and maybe it's a little bit boring, but at least I know I'm going to have money at the end of the day. So it gets even crazier than this because Dungeons and Dragons has even been therapeutic for death row prisoners. And like in some of these situations, sometimes death row prisons where like you had areas where you could walk around in, but some of these are like I am locked in a cell and I can't leave my cell. And there's no prison-sponsored programming for these people, but they have very little they can do but play D&D. So there was one guy named Billy Wardlow that I read a lot about, and he was a big example of showing how much impact this can make. Wardlow's mother always told him when he was young that he was a gift from God. And after his older brother died at a young age, she had prayed to have another son, and soon afterwards along came Billy, and he was born. But she never really treated him like she said that he was a gift from God. She would beat him with like PVC pipes, beat him with belts. And when he was 10 years old, he stole some money from her purse and she pulled a gun on him. And like, despite all of these hardships of, growing up this way, he did pretty well with school, and he really enjoyed learning about electronics, and he was very good at understanding how electronics worked. And this would have been like the 1970s or 80s. And when he graduated high school, he and his girlfriend were planning to steal a pickup truck, drive to a different state, get away from all of the bad memories that they had growing up, and start this new life together. And the truck robbery they did went wrong, and he ended up killing the owner, which resulted in him getting this death sentence in the early 1990s at the age of 18. So in prison, Wardlow was introduced to D&D. A lot of the inmates did not know about D&D beforehand, and a lot of them actually learn it once they get in. And he started playing it as a form of escapism. And he played in many campaigns over, a long time, and was known for playing a wizard named Arthax Decaneth. And here's the description of what his character was all about. This was his character bio. Born to a professor and an inventor, Arthax had a twin sister who died as a baby. After the girl's death, Arthax's mother refused to let the tragedy derail her academic career. Instead, she threw herself into her work, leaving her son to be raised by tutors. They gave him all the tools for magical greatness, and after graduating early from a prestigious wizarding college, he got a job with a top guild where he invented secret weapons for war. Arthax could cast spells and control the elements, manipulate electricity, or send walls of fire raging across enemy battlefields. Every day, Arthax used his gifts to help the higher-ups of House Cannith perfect the invention they hoped that would end a century of war. At night, he came home to his wife, his childhood sweetheart.
Wow.
Do you see the connection there?
Yeah.
Yeah, where like he basically Arthax Decaneth is how Billy's life would have turned out if his mother had treated him differently. And this was his way of being able to connect with these feelings. And he may not be able to change his current way in life, but he was able to, in this scenario, like his electronics turned into a career. He doesn't have to run away, doesn't start a new life, it doesn't end up in prison. And he was trying to, dream of what his life could have been. And one of the death row inmates referred to Billy as their personal form of therapy, because whenever they would play games like this, the inmates, they didn't fight as much, and they would open up about their trauma, and they would, they were willing to talk about things. They would talk about like when they had a parent die and how they struggled with that. And it became a way for them to, really bring things out in the open. And in 2019, there was like a very big, like climactic battle that happened, and Arthax Decaneth ended up actually dying in that battle. And soon after his character died, like the whole rest of the party, they all just like, they were not able to overcome this.
Wow.
And Billy just said like, I think it's done. I think I'm done playing him. Like, I'm not going to try and resurrect him. Like, this is what it's going to be. And in 2020, after 30 years on death row, he was executed. I am very fortunate to have never spent time in prison, and I cannot even pretend to imagine what it's truly like. And I know it's silly, but I feel like Dungeons & Dragons has a more official place in our prisons. Just with this one guy's story, why do they have to hide the whole, we're going on our fantasy adventure? Why can't that be, I don't know, why can't that be a class? I don't know, maybe why can't life skills in general be a class in prison? One of my biggest takeaways from this is that prisoners are forever defined by the worst day of their lives, and I think they should get a chance to practice becoming the heroes of a new story.
We talk a lot about video games on this podcast, or it seems like we do. Maybe we don't. We talk a lot about video games in person, I think, at least. Did you ever play those games that, like, have no end, but the goal is to just like get a higher score than someone else, like Temple Run or Flappy Bird. Did you ever play those games?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess a lot of the game I like to play games that have at least some. Maybe you can play them forever, but there's some sort of point where it says like, I want to see credits roll. I
Sure,
guess.
I understand that, and I think I also enjoy those games, but I really enjoy the games where like the only like it's simple. Because to be honest, I'm not good at video games. Like, and I guess it's different. The type of video game, I suppose that you're talking about, like a story-driven, like an indie game. I guess you don't really have to be good at video games a lot of times. It depends, of course, right?
Right.
But
I like to play. I mean, I like to play roguelikes and roguelites as well. There's a lot of subgenres there. But I think those are similar to what we're saying though, because you have a run and you're playing, and in theory you could beat it, but oftentimes you just keep going. And
right.
Yes.
So, but I've always loved those games. I for some reason I just like being able to like get a high score, and even if it's just the best myself, but oftentimes like maybe to beat my friends or to beat the people that it's like with Temple Run. It was this huge game on a phone. You're this little guy running through like ruins of a like some kind of whatever temple, I guess, and you're just running and you have to jump and you have to go left and right and up and whatever, and it was just fun. And basically how many yards or meters or feet or whatever you win, that was the goal. And I just liked being able to go as far as I could and finding my friends and being like, what's your high score, and what's your high score. And in high school, in computer lab, we would always play these flash games. I don't know if you remember doing that.
Oh yeah.
But like there was this one that was just a helicopter, and based on like holding and clicking the mouse button, it would go up and down, and you basically just had to navigate. It was kind of like Flappy Bird. You had to navigate through like a cave or like a tunnel system or whatever, and it was who could go the farthest, who could go the farthest with a helicopter. We did this all the time. It was super fun. Unending games have always been really fun for me. Another one, I guess, while we're talking about it, one of my favorites that I still love, would still play constantly, is Call of Duty Zombies. Did you ever play Call of Duty Zombies?
Very little. I mean, I think I have technically played at some point, but not really.
It's like a round-based thing, and there's no end, and the goal is to kill the zombies and to get to the next round. And the goal, like, there isn't really an end. It's just
it's like a horde mode. I think is like the generic term.
Every round there's more, and every round there's more, and it just keeps going and going. And your goal is to play as long as you can, and then when you die, and it's over, right? And I love that game. It's fun. They're so fun, and all those games have always been fun. But today I want to talk to you about one of the most famous, well-known, solid, all-around, well-played, best-selling, unending games of this genre that has ever been: Tetris.
Yeah.
You ever played Tetris?
Oh yeah, of course. Who among us has not played Tetris
That's the
at
thing.
some point?
It truly is like it's one of the best selling games of all time. My mom is, if I remember right, I think my mom's pretty good at Tetris.
Nice.
Growing up, like we had an NES. My mom would like occasionally she would play some game with me. I think my mom was really good at Tetris, way better than I ever have been. But what makes this story interesting is that even though this game was created to never be beaten, to be an unending, level-based, keep going and going forever and ever, get the highest score you can before you die game, someone nearly 40 years after it was invented has just beaten it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. And in order for me to tell you the story of it getting beat, you need to first understand a little bit about the state of the game, a little bit more about the history of Tetris. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, if there's someone out there who doesn't know, Tetris is a game where you have a screen and these shapes go from the top to the bottom, right? There's multiple different shapes, which I just learned are called tetrominoes.
Okay.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Wait, don't they all have names or something
They
weird?
do all have names, but basically the gist of it is one is shaped like... There's two that are shaped like L's, one facing one way, one facing the other. Two that are shaped like S's or Z's, one facing one facing the other. A square and a line, basically. And your goal is to, as they fall, you place them on this board in such a way, kind of like a puzzle. And then when they fit together, if you get them to cover an entire line, that line will go away. And so if you fill in like multiple lines at a time, those lines go away. And how this works is basically they fall at a constant rate for the round. And then once you clear enough lines, once you get the pieces in the right spot, the next round will come, which means that those pieces start falling faster. And every round they start falling faster and faster. They cannot be slowed down, they cannot be stopped, but they can be pushed down faster. You're allowed to speed them up. But basically, when you clear a line, you get 100 points. When you clear 2 lines, you get 200 points. When you clear 3 lines, there's like a multiplier, basically.
Right.
But when you clear all 4 lines, it's called a Tetris. That's what the
Yes.
game is named after. And then when you get 1 Tetris, it's worth 800. If you get 2 Tetrises in a row, it's like a 1,200 point bonus, right? And so basically the goal is to go as long as you can, go through as the speed gets faster and faster, get as many lines off, and the more lines you get, the higher the level goes, the faster they go. It speeds up and it speeds up every single round until you reach level 29. Level 29 is the point where it goes as fast as it possibly will ever go. From level 29 forward, it doesn't speed up anymore. But level 29 was created to be the point that no one could play. It's too fast, right? In fact, it moves so quick that every frame, it moves 6 spaces. So it's very difficult to play past level 29.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. I've never made it anywhere near that far. Okay, because again, I'm not great at Tetris.
Same here. I've never been able to do it pretty far. I mean, it's even if you're not good, I feel like it's still fun.
Right. And this, like I said, this is the game that was created to beat you. You're not supposed to beat it, right? You're just supposed to get the amount of points you can get, the most you can get. And so level 29 was what the developers deemed the kill screen, because you're gonna die. Right, yeah. This is where it ends.
In Soviet Russia, game beats you.
That's right. That's funny. That's funny. That's good. And so this game, for years and like literally for decades, people played it to get as many points as they could up until level 29, and then they would die. And that's how the high score system worked, right? And games have been around a long time, and anytime that a game is around, there's kind of a cult following at least of this game. And so people played, and there's records, and you can look through all the records, and people, high scores and whatever. And so that's how it worked. Up until level 29, you had to get a high score. But then after 29, you're dead. But recently, a lot more recently than you would assume, it took people quite a while to figure this out. This is about 4 years ago. A man named Joseph Salih was the very first person to ever pass level 29, because he sort of figured out that if you push buttons fast enough at the right amount of time, you can actually move the pieces quicker than anyone ever could. So they can actually kind of move them where they want them to go. If they know, there's a little screen that shows you what piece is coming next, right? And so you know what's coming, and so you can kind of have an idea where to put it. So this guy's the first guy ever in 2018. He's the first guy ever to pass level 29. He makes it all the way to level 33. And it's crazy. It took this long, but it finally happened. And this made people realize maybe there's more to this game than we ever thought there was, right? It's made to be an unending game. How unending is it really?
Sure.
Can somebody beat it? I don't know. If you've ever played an NES, that's what this is all based off of, the NES. If you've ever played an NES, it's a square controller made of plastic with, on the left side, there's like a plastic D-pad that's all one button, but it's like directional, up, down, left, right. And the other side, there's 2 buttons, the A and the B button, right? And there's really only so much that can be done for how fast you can push a button.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of just, you're at the mercy of the hardware that you're given. It's not really tactile. It's kind of mushy. It's hard to push those buttons fast. Yeah. You ever played games like Track and Field on the NES? You have to tap the button really fast. There's only so much you can do, right? Yes. Well, that's where this new technique comes in. And it's called rolling. Have you ever heard of rolling?
No.
Okay, so it's simple, but it's kind of a way for the human to beat the controller, right? Because we're being held back by our hardware at this point. We can't move any farther in the game because the game's holding us back, right? Well, this technique is called rolling, and what you do is, if you ever watch competitive Tetris in any way, or if you see someone play Tetris today who's good at it, they will be using this technique. It's called rolling. Basically, what you do is you sit the controller on your lap, and you use one hand on top of it, and like you have part of your hand, it's like almost like you have like a claw on the top, right? Okay. And one side of it is you're holding the A and the B button, and the other side you're applying pressure to the directional pad. And then with your other hand, you put it underneath the controller.
What?
And you roll your fingers as you're applying pressure to the D-pad. So basically, like when you I don't know if you can hear this or not, like this. You roll up and down, and so basically you're able to click that button like 4 or 5 times faster than you could if you were just clicking.
Oh.
Because you're like rolling, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so everyone is able, it's crazy. It looks kind of ridiculous. And if you get into it, like if you look this up, like people they wear gloves and everything. Like it's like they're pretty into it.
I hope it's a power glove. That would be great if it's like the NES power glove.
We're talking like cotton gloves, okay? Like, yeah, because it's hard on your hands or something, I guess.
I have to imagine.
And so basically all what you're doing is they figured out a way to click the button really fast, right? And this is a technique that kind of just came out of nowhere. Someone started using it, and all of a sudden everyone realized, well, I can move this way faster. So people who are really into Tetris kind of caught on quickly. It's crazy, right? You can just click so fast. It's kind of ridiculous looking. And really, if you've never played Tetris, if you've never tried what they're doing, it just kind of looks ridiculous. But it's it really is technically interesting.
Yeah, I would have assumed that if the problem is that the game is hard, I don't know how to beat it, people don't know how to do it. I feel like people would find a way to manipulate the game to make this work.
Yes.
So the idea that people said, I need to manipulate people and like
Right.
we need to evolve.
We need to be better.
Yes.
I know. It is interesting because normally people just like find a way to like.
Yes.
It's not even cheating in these games if you find like a glitch. It's like I found a glitch that will help me do this, right? And they finally figured out if you click a button this amount of times, it'll allow you to move before the frame's over and all this stuff. It's very interesting. So for many, many years, reaching level 29 was the goal, right? To get to level 29 was big. And then once people started getting to 29, they started thinking, well, how many points can I get before I get to 29? So the game kind of became, well, how can I maximize my points at the low levels?
Sure.
What happened next when people started making it to 29 was, well, how many lines can I clear on level 29? People just started trying that. They'd get all their points, they'd get to 29, see how many lines they could clear on 29. And soon, of people trying to clear lines on 29, someone got to level 33. We already talked about that. Finally, people get to 33. So now the thing is, well, how many levels can I actually pass? If I can go past 29, how many can I go? There's no way we can beat this game, but how can we go? Is there an end? There wasn't an end, except maybe there is. Eventually, when someone gets into something as much as these people are getting into this game, when you get this interested, this obsessed over something, you figure out a lot of things about it. And at this point, they've had some AI that's been created to play this game. So basically, people create like a program that will play the game for them, that it can do things that they can't do, so they can kind of figure out how to understand the game better. And they'll watch it play, and they'll understand all these things that are going on. So they have this AI, and they've figured out that there's a point in the game, even though it is technically unending, that because of multiple factors, basically the limitations of the software and the hardware and all the things at the time, the computing technology that we had when the NES came out, if you get to a certain point, the game will just crash.
Interesting.
It'll stop working. There's no credits or anything like that. Like
Right.
it's not created to end, but the game will get to a point where it just, like, some command is told and it's too confusing, or it can't do the thing it wants, and it'll just crash. It'll just stop, causing the game to end, causing the game to lose and the player to win. But for humans to beat this, there are some complications. First, you have to be incredibly fluent at just playing the game at its max speed at level 29. Because, as I said, people get really into this. And someone got into this enough that they were able to, like, basically collect all this data from watching the AI and figuring out and, like, kind of reverse engineering and looking at all the code, that the first time it will be possible to crash the game is on level 155.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was going to be like 35 and
so
they're
they have
almost there.
to play at max speed, clearing more and more lines every round to get to the next level until level 155. And on level 155, in order to cause the crash, you have to clear one line. Just one. So if you clear more than one line, you go to the next level and it's done, right? So you're stuck, like, you've missed it, right? And there are more options, and basically someone has, like I said, a bunch of people, they're analyzing, they're figuring out, like, at this level you have to do this, at this level you have to do this. The farther and farther you go in the game, the more likely a crash gets, because the more information it has, and it gets, like, the computer gets more confused,
Right. Yeah, that sounds like it might be like an overflow or an underflow or something, where there are sometimes certain, like, digits where
Yes.
the number that controls whether it's the level or, I don't know, certain things that there's a finite number, and then when you hit that number, it resets back to 0, or like a number it was never supposed to hit. I have to imagine that must be what's happening.
Yeah, yes. There's a lot of computer stuff, like, that I understand at a very small level, that basically means there's enough numbers, and the higher you go, the more numbers there are, and the more confused it gets, and it'll be like, sorry, we can't do that. Stop.
But in a much less elegant way.
Yes, it just freaks out. So people have to be very fluent at playing on the max speed for a very long time. It's so fast that, like, the creators of the game thought it was too fast to play. Like, they thought this is the end, right? So people have to be good enough to just play. Most people are just going to give up at this point, right? But also, the fact that the code isn't perfect and the hardware is old and all the problems of that still exist means there's another problem. And that's when you reach a certain level, it's in like the mid-hundreds, the colors start glitching.
Whoa.
And so when you reach certain levels, the first few are not bad. They just kind of change, like, color palettes. Like, it'll be green and purple and pink. But then there's a couple levels in, like, the level 130-ish area where they, of course, the players, they've named these these stages. The first one, one of them's charcoal and one of them's dusk. But basically, one's like monochrome and dark, and the other one's like blue and green and dark. And like because they're on CRT TVs, and it's very hard to see. Like it becomes very, very difficult to even see what's going on.
It's like the game's fighting back.
Yeah, literally, it's like and it only lasts for one level. And once they pass, it goes away, right?
Oh.
So once you get enough lines in that color scheme, you can move past. But people played enough, and once they finally reached these, people couldn't pass these.
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing, like, we can't even beat it. This is impossible. We can't see. But yet again, people have been surprised. People work hard enough. They get what they want. They pass these levels.
How about like music? So we talked about visual glitches. Do you get any weird audio cues?
Not that I know of. All that I have read about, all that I've heard about is completely visual completely visual, basically.
Okay, so it doesn't play a different Russian folk song whenever you get farther. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was so caught off guard a few years ago when I was living in an apartment, and I just hear like the Tetris song playing outside of my apartment, and I look outside and there's an ice cream truck playing it. Like, how are they not getting sued by this? And then I learned that like the main kind of song from Tetris is an 1800s Russian folk song.
I know. Isn't that crazy? And it seems odd because like normally games like have their own stuff, but it's like it's just like it's not. I know. That's crazy. It's a good song too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's really good. I enjoy it. To recap real quickly, basically, it's very hard because you have to play very fast. It's very hard because there are glitches in the game that make it even harder. Makes the game's very difficult. But eventually, like I said, beginning at level 155, there is a chance that you could cause the kill screen, which would mean you effectively are beating the game. People realize that this is possible, and once people started playing and getting up to these screens where the colors glitch, they realized this might be something we can do. This might be something our community can actually figure out. We can beat this game. So basically, to keep it short, not to get into the technical details anymore, because I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point.
I mean, it's super complicated. I don't blame you.
At the end of 2023, so I'm talking just a few weeks ago from where we're recording this. It'll be like a little over a month ago when this podcast comes out, maybe 2, I don't know. A 13-year-old kid named Willis Gibson, but who goes by the name Blue Scooty, made it to the level 155 of Tetris. And when he was on 155, he cleared 3 lines and did not cause the crash. But he kept on, and he kept on. And because Blue Scooty knows what he's doing, he knows at level 159, there's another opportunity to crash the game. And he gets to level 159, and he becomes the first person ever to beat the game Tetris. A 13-year-old kid became the first person ever to beat Tetris. And he didn't even beat it at the lowest level possible. He beat it at level 159, which is insane. A kid who is only 25% the age of the game just beat the game, which no one had ever done ever before. He kind of came out of nowhere.
Sure.
Because if you're into the scene at all, which I'm not, but I read about it, right? This isn't a name that you would have heard of until very recently. Blue Scooty, he's kind of new.
I mean, he just came out of grade school, honestly.
Literally. I mean, he's started from the bottom, now we're here, you know? It's kind of inspiring, really, to see this kid accomplish something so great in this community. But there's another part of this story that's almost equally, if not more, inspiring to me. And as you can assume, Blue Scooty isn't the only one who's good at Tetris, right? There's a World Tetris Championship every year, and there's many, many people who compete in this. There's a lot of people who are considered equally as good as each other at this game. There are a lot of people who knew this was possible. There are a lot of people in the scene, a lot of people who knew they could do it. In fact, for quite some time, there was one specific person who was actually live streaming like every single day his attempts to get to the kill screen, to be the first person to the kill screen. His name's Justin Yu. He goes by the name Fractal161. He's also the winner of the most recent World Tetris Championships, and he'd been trying over and over again every day. He'd kind of like made it this thing that he was going to do it. He's going to be the first to it. And during one of his live streams, there's a video of it. It's actually really cool. He, in the middle of his run, he hears that Blue Scooty has a great run going, and he stops what he's doing, and he goes and he watches his live stream for him and all the people watching him, and he's like visibly like nervous and excited that this might happen, right? And he's watching it, and as soon as he does it, as soon as Scooty gets the kill screen on 159, Fractal like gets up and jumps and claps, and he's super pumped. He's so excited that something so big has happened. He's not angry. He doesn't hate the kid.
Which is
right?
great. I'm glad to hear
it's beautiful. He's so happy that someone did what he wanted to do so badly, even though they did it first. It really, truly is inspiring. I wish the world acted a little bit more like this guy did in this situation. So here's the thing. If you like video games or not, if you like retro video games or not, if you like new ones, old ones, whatever, right? What I learned from this entire scenario is that if you try really hard, you might be able to do something no one has ever done before. But I also learned that someone can beat you to it. But humanity moving forward, gaming moving forward, the things we care about getting better is a good thing. And I can celebrate that, even if it wasn't me.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. As always, if you have a factoid you want to share with us, just send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com.
You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. Pocket Cast is my new personal favorite. Thank you, Payton.
You bet. Yeah, I love it.
And so I recommend that to you if you're just listening on our website. The experience is much better on Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts, or you can go to our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.